my name is Marley and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be making another book related video. I'm going to be ranking Colleen Hoover'S books from worst to best, excluding Regretting You, which is her newest book that I haven't read yet, and I won't be counting any of her novellas, only her full-length novels. Last year I got a little bit obsessed with Colleen Hoover'S books and I read like all of them within a couple of months. So I think I'm a pretty good person to do this. It's still mostly fresh in my mind and I read them all back to back, so I was constantly comparing them anyways. And just so you know, Colleen writes mostly contemporary romances, which tend to be tragic. She's known to have a lot of tragedy, a lot of sadness in her books as well. But yeah, if you've never heard of Colleen Hoover or you're interested in reading her books, I'm gonna save you from your time being wasted and let you know which ones you should be reading and which ones you shouldn't be worrying about. So beginning with the worst of the worst would be Too Late, which ranks at number 12. I would not recommend this book to anyone. It's about this girl who's lived like a really terrible life. Like her mom is a drug addict and she finally escaped her with her brother who has some sort of disability. I forget what it is, but her brother is in a home and she is going to school to try to get a better life for her and her brother. But during school she starts dating this guy who seems very charming, but he ends up being extremely abusive and, well, a psychopath. He's extremely manipulative. Just in his example, he literally fakes like government documents, like paperwork, to make it seem like her brother's care, like the home he's in, is no longer being funded. So he is gonna pay for it for her, trapping her in a relationship. If she breaks up with him, then she thinks her brother's home is no longer being funded. So she feels like she's trapped dating him. And the reason he is so rich is because he's a drug dealer. So the story is basically that there's an undercover cop who comes to try and infiltrate the drug dealer's like gang and catch him. And of course the cop ends up falling in love with the main girl. I forget character names at this point. I found the love story portion to be very unrealistic and very rushed, and the amount of uncomfortable abuse scenes you have to sit through and read through was really tough to do. It was really like sickening and I felt like a lot of it was just not needed. Like, we get that he's abusive, like we don't need to read the same scene of him doing these things to her all the time. I really did not enjoy that at all, so I would not recommend reading that. I know sometimes like abuse stories can like really hit home or like, you know, have good messages or whatever but this one like honestly didn't. So don't bother. At number 11, it's gonna be All Your Perfects. This book is actually not bad. I don't know why I ranked it so low, but like I guess mostly just based on like entertainment value. It sort of had a simple story which made it a little less entertaining. It's basically about a couple who is having trouble having kids. The woman cannot get pregnant and then I think they can't adopt because the man was arrested at some point in his past, like a minor thing. They're really struggling in their marriage. So kind of like a bit more of a basic story for Colleen to do compared to our other books. It's still very good if you've gone through something like that where you've struggled with pregnancy. Maybe you would enjoy it more than I did. Number 10, I would rank November 9. This is a romance surrounding the date November 9th. Basically, a guy and a girl meet on this date and, you know, sort of fall in love within one day, and for some odd reason they decide to not communicate for a whole year and just start meeting up on November 9th for the next consecutive like 5 or 6 years. I originally was really interested in this idea. I thought it was kind of cute. However, the more I think about it, it is kind of dumb. Like, why don't they just talk? Like, that was a big thing. It's like, why don't you just talk? Like, why don't you just call each other during the year? So I'd only recommend this if you're like really into cheesy romances and if you're not that critical of a reader. Number 9 is gonna be Ugly Love, which I think a lot of people like because this is very romance based. However, like the more I think about it, the more reviews I read, there again is kind of like unhealthy stuff. It's about a girl, I think she's like a nursing student, and she falls in love with this guy who's a pilot, but he had some like traumatic things happen to him in the past. He won't commit basically, so they agreed to be friends with benefits. Classic. She of course stays with him because she thinks that things will change, like eventually after enough time has gone by he'll fall in love with her. I suppose very back and forth and him being like, I'm not gonna change, and she's thinking that he will, blah blah blah. It's very angsty, so I'd recommend this to you if you're into like the friends with benefits storyline and like a lot of angst. Also, if you like reading about a lot of sex. It definitely got a little awkward reading this on the subway sometimes. I felt like people are gonna look over my shoulder and see that I was reading these pretty steamy sex scenes, so if you're into that. Coming in at number 8 is Maybe Someday. This is basically a romance between a girl and a deaf musician. That's essentially the story. This girl catches her boyfriend cheating on her, so she moves in with this guy and his roommates, and he is a musician who happens to be deaf, and they start writing music together, but then oh no, he has a girlfriend, so drama. The story actually had a novella that went along with it called Maybe Not. If you end up reading this book, I would recommend reading the companion novella as well, because that adds a lot to the story. Number 7 on my ranking would be Confess. It's basically about a artist who does paintings based off of other people's confessions that people leave anonymously for him. Like it might be, oh, I'm crushing on my best friend's boyfriend or something more deep, and then he'll make a painting surrounding that. And Colleen actually got real confessions from her readers, I believe, which actually makes it a lot more interesting. The main character ends up working for him for one of his exhibits, and that's how they meet and they fall in love. And I can't really say much else about why they can't be together. It's kind of spoilery, but it was a good romance. I did quite like the couple in this more than a lot of her other books, and the whole confession like painting thing is a cool idea. There was a twist at the end that I did appreciate. It was one of Colleen's sort of classic, oh, the couple's more connected than you'd think sort of twists, which I like. Number 6 is going to be Slammed, and number 5 is going to be Hopeless. These are 2 of her first books that I read a few years ago, so I actually don't remember them as much as all of these other ones, but I'm ranking them sort of in the middle because I think I really enjoyed them. Slammed is about a relationship between a student and a teacher, which looking back, I'm not as big of a fan of that idea. However, I think the girl's 18 and I think the teacher is like pretty young. It's a cute love story, however there is a lot of like sadness and tragedy in it too, so read this if you want cuteness and you want to cry. As for Hopeless, it's sort of similar. It has a good love story, probably one of the better relationship developments. It was also my first time experiencing one of Colleen Hoover'S classic twists, so I remember being very like shook by it. However, this novel is extremely upsetting, as sort of a common theme with Colleen's books, so just be aware like there is a lot of like abuse on like children, so don't read it if those sort of things are triggering for you. Getting to my top 4 Colleen Hoover books, these are ones that I actually really like and would recommend all of these. So number 4 is It Ends With Us. For this one, it follows a girl's life through flashbacks and then the present day. The flashbacks are in high school and we see what it was like growing up with an abusive father, and we also see her first love during that time. Present day, we see her as an adult opening her own business and having like new relationships. Abusive relationships is a main theme in this book. However, as opposed to the book Too Late, which I mentioned before, where it seemed very like unnecessary abuse and it was very uncomfortable to read, this just seemed like a lot more of a realistic story that actually had a good message to go along with it. It's actually based on the relationship between Colleen Hoover's parents, so that's why it is more of a realistic story, as it is based on a real relationship. So I definitely recommend it. It's quite eye-opening into that experience of growing up with like abusive parents and then how that leads into like your own relationships. Number 3 for me is going to be Never Never, which is technically not a novel. It's a series of 3 novellas. However, I'm counting it because I really enjoyed it.
And I won't be counting any of her novellas.
She co-authored it with Taryn Fisher, and it is a romance as well as sort of like a mystery. Basically, these 2 people in high school wake up one day and they don't remember anything about who they are or what's going on in their lives, and they don't remember each other, but they quickly find out that they were dating. So that's how they start talking and realize they both don't know what's going on. They have to backtrack and like sleuth and figure out like what happened to them, what happened the night before they forgot. And then each novella, like each of the 3 novellas, ends right when the day is finishing, and each day resets, so their memory resets and they forget everything again. So it's sort of like a race against the clock to figure out what happened before they forget each day. I have to say the ending was like slightly disappointing, just with so much build up to it. However, overall I did really enjoy it. Number 2 is going to be Without Mercy. I found it a lot different than her other books because even though it did have a romance in it, that wasn't the main focus. It actually focused a lot more on the main character, who's named Mercy, and her relationship with her whole family. So there were a lot more characters than we normally get. This made it a lot more interesting, and there was a lot more of a fun dynamic to it, even though it definitely wasn't like super realistic or anything. But it was definitely nice to see something more different from Colleen, which leads me to my favorite Colleen Hoover novel, which is Verity. This book has romance again, of course, but it is also more of a thriller mystery novel, which is what made it so good. And this is her book that I would recommend to everyone, even if you're not into like the cheesy romance books like she normally writes. It follows an author. She has like social anxiety, which has affected her career because she doesn't like to go out on tour and meet fans and stuff like that. But she gets the chance to take over writing for this famous author who does have that fame and that hype because that author got into an accident, so she needs someone to take over writing her books. The main character goes to the author Verity, her house, with her husband and her kid, and she has to go through her office and find her notes on the series and basically like try and finish the series for her. Also, Verity is actually in the house as like brain dead, and then when reading through Verity's notes, she finds an autobiography that basically makes Verity sound evil, like she's had this like evil plan. I won't say more than that because that's super like spoilery. You should go in with nothing, but basically it's like a very creepy novel that takes place in this house. When I was reading it, I honestly felt really creeped out. Like I would walk down the street and be looking over my shoulder because that's how like much it affected me. So yeah, that is how I would rank Colleen Hoover's books. All of them except for Regretting You, which I haven't read yet. Hopefully I will soon. Let me know how you would rank them if you've read hers, and hopefully this helped you find some book recommendations as well. So thanks again for watching. Bye!